So get the basic background done, and boy, now I can even size my brush. Draw some cracks, and it really doesn't matter, where you put them in. You could overlay them. You could overlay some of those textures I use, but I'm just going to draw a couple. And I usually won't use a straight line or anything, because I really kind of want at least a more organic shape. Although, having said that, I could start the lazy Nezumi thing, and their cracks, their brush that makes a little more random line might be pretty good for doing this. The one thing I will try to keep in mind is I'm going to be doing, where the light's going to be coming from. If you don't keep track of your light, it can cause some problems when you're drawing this stuff. So you can decide how much you want it to crack. There's some sort of method to the madness. It's some sort of fractal thing that makes this stuff work the way it does. I don't know what it is, so I just try to make it look like whatever cracks might be. Okay, so at its most basic, this is what I would do. I want to make sure, at least for this, I don't have any little floating bits in here, or light lines, light part. It's good to have kind of thick and thin. And if you get just the fundamental stuff down, then you can often cut a little bit of corner doing this and just duplicate the layer, and I'll show you. Okay, so you can see I've got a few little lighter lines here and there in this. Generally speaking, I'd probably like to get rid of those. And a quick way is just to duplicate the layer. And hopefully I'm drawing on the wrong layer. Oh well. So we're going to do this by hand now. Layer management is not my strength. But I would duplicate it, and it would fill in a lot of this stuff. But now I'm going to have to actually paint the cracks like I would. So I'm going to assume now, make a new layer, and this is going to be light source. This is just the light direction. So I'll have it coming from somewhere above about 45 degrees. This is the standard thing you come to expect. So it's the easiest one to draw and paint because we're most used to seeing it. And it's in front of the rocks. It can't be behind them. It's got to be in front of them. And this is what I'll go with. So in this lighting, where it's coming this way, all of these edges that are on the bottom of the cracks will light up. You won't, so on this side, get a bright enough one. This will be the light edge of the crack based on my light. So I'll go ahead and paint those in. This is on a new layer, so I can erase it. I will have some light on this edge, but it'll be smaller and not as noticeable because it's not being as directly impacted as the light here. So this is just the most basic crack. I'm going to expand on it. So now you don't want to come in and put light on the wrong side. That'll just throw your viewer off. And I'm not going to have really any light on this side because it's almost running, the crack's almost running parallel to the light source. So I won't have much here. A little bit, maybe right here where it starts to turn. But anything that is running relatively parallel to where your light's coming from, you're not going to get the reflection. When you just paint regular objects, so say if you're painting, a treasure chest or box or something, it is a good idea on the edges of the objects facing the light that you do put a little tiny thin highlight along there. It doesn't have to be noticeable, but nothing really in our world is manufactured so well that it doesn't have a little bit of edge that as it turns, it doesn't pick up the light. I mean, it can be really sharp, but this edge is never so sharp that it won't pick up the light. So people will recognize what they're looking at, whether you do that or not, but it will increase the believability of what you're doing. So just think about that. It can't be too big, or things start looking dull and kind of boring. So there's not going to be a lot of crack along these edges. However, there will be on here. And here. So at its easiest, and I'll say that's a new crack forming, so put one on the edge right there. There won't be anything really there. This is not really going to have much along it. If you paint along it, it might look a little strange, so I would say resist that temptation. So there's basically, at its easiest, a crack. Now I want to expand on it to do widen it and make it a little deeper. And that's really easy. It's not very hard. So what I'm going to do is, with my brush, and I'm going to create a new layer. Just again, let me rename this one. Create a new layer, and I'm going to just call this More Dark Cracks. I would save almost all the time now too. So let's see. Let me make this crack wide. Whoops, sorry. In some respects, I think being a little more rough with your paint technique is not a bad thing. Just cracking rock doesn't really crack too mechanically. I'm going to add a crack too, just because I feel like it. I think I'll make another, make a big hole on the edge of this one. You know what? I'm going to hide the light ones right now so I can make it rough on both sides. Kind of like painting these floating rock things. Whoops. I don't want to make all the cracks too heavy or that'll look stupid, I think. That's not a real good critique, but you know. I may want to add just some more little starter cracks. I don't know if I ever really would use reference for doing this. I might if I was painting some big red rock cliffs or something, but okay, now I want to do the same thing with the lights. So I'm going to move the light cracks up above this one, turn it on, and I'll erase a couple of these. And what I'm going to do is try to what I'm going to do, because I think it works and it looks good, is I'm going to do the same thing I did with the dark cracks with the large cracks, but I'm going to alternate where they're large and where they're small. So right here, the light edge will be smaller, but then I'll make it a lot bigger as it goes out here. It just seems to look a little more convincing to me, a little more natural. Get rid of that. And I might add a rock back into there. Okay, so start up here. I guess I better got to get the light color. Then up here I will widen this out. I will usually go back in at some point and clean up some of the edges with the eraser, so I'll probably do that here. So I'm going to cut this off and make it light. Like there's a big chunk of rock on there. And the same thing here. In some ways, this is a lot like painting, believe it or not, fabric, in that you want to work with really kind of crisp edge strokes. You don't want cracks to be curved. They just don't really work that way. Okay, now I've hit to where there's not going to be, this will be too light, but I can fix that. But if I make this chunky, then I can put some light hitting some of these edges going down. And I'm not going to add much to that, just a little tiny edge. This is one of, when I do this kind of stuff too, I can really get way too caught up having fun doing detail. And so I kind of have to watch myself now and then not to get too carried away. Okay. Okay, they're looking much wider now, which is good. And now what I will do is crack my neck. I'm going to fill in some of the darker with a kind of reflected light. Make this look a little more cracked up. Okay, so I'm going to use basically kind of the tone that's on here, but I want to warm it up some, so I'll pull it over so there's a little more color, like the rock is reflecting. And I probably should do this on a new layer. It's too light. You don't want your light, the lights that you put in here, to look like they're not in the correct value range. So make sure what I do is I squint at it, and if it's looking too light, pick the color. I will darken it. I won't go back in and blend this stuff because I do want it to look a little bit more ragged. But I do want some of the cracks to be really dark, so I won't do this everywhere. Although to make this look like a big crack, I might do a little more of it. Okay, I want to give a little bit more dimension. Whoops. And make these look maybe a little rounder. Excuse me. So I'm going to, on this, I'm going to create a new layer under here. And what I'm going to do is pull some of this lighter color, but not quite as light, into some areas to try to get it to look like there's maybe some stair stepping, or just kind of keep it pretty jaggy. I can't tell you what my rhyme or reasoning is a lot, except that I will periodically go out and, so now that looks, okay, those look like serviceable cracks to me, small, but I think they start to look much more interesting if I can add some weathering on top of them. So that's really what I'm doing at this point. And it can go on both sides. So, and I don't want to put too much detail in it. I'm using really a light touch. Keep it mostly by the cracks, because that's kind of where I think it'll fracture off if the rock's to break. Okay, then what I'll do is on the lighter cracks, I'll add some of the lighter cracks coming up in to these areas I just painted. And I'm not going to really add any dark, corners on any of these, because I just want it to look like more of a worn surface than more cracking. And if I've been not as cautious, or I look at this kind of through eyes like I'm looking for, if the light's coming in, I'm looking for the edges of these light areas that kind of face it here and there, that it would make sense to have, another part of rock coming in, but not necessarily a big hole. It's more like just with weather and things, it's starting to shelve a little bit there. Water gets in and starts to crack. And it's for the most part, it really is by feel. Depends a lot on the rock too. If I was doing real soft sandstone or something, I might do some more painting using a gradient with some selections, but I like this kind of stuff. Okay, I'll check this out, see if I'm overdoing it. Because I like doing this so much, there is always a danger of overdoing it. So probably, oh, good grief. I'm just trying to manually just roughen up the stone just a little bit. And you will be the the deciding factor with this. So I'm knocking some of that down a little bit. Okay. I want to reinforce the real dark areas. So I'm going to go ahead and merge all these together, I think. I can do that now. So what I was telling you earlier, if I wanted these, if they were different, like these are all normal layers, but if I switched them, and so I was going to get some selections that, screen would go real light, multiply would go dark, I would simply do this and then select the top one and do Shift, Control, Alt, and E, and it created me a new layer with all of these layers as one. So I can just paint on the top layer now, and what I'll do is group these and just keep them if I need to go back to them. So basic rock cracks or something. And I don't need to see it, so I'll just turn it off. I'll usually move them out of the way, either up or down, away from the area I'm painting. So I'm going to go ahead and paint on this. I'm going to clean up the dark cracks. Whoops. I hit the Windows key, sorry. I don't necessarily want there to be a dark edge along here, though it could be, so. I'm going to put in here a little bit of reflected light that's got a lot of color in it. I like the way rock kind of reflects, especially, around here with red rocks and things. It'll reflect a lot of color back into the other side. So let me make this a little bit smaller. And this is, I'm trying to make this look like the start of a crack. So because this angle I'm now saying is, it's flat and then it goes at a 45 degree away from the light source, it won't get as dark as from the light source. Then I will go ahead and pull a little bit of the light, like it's going down in there, disappearing. And then the crack gets wider here and will go dark. So if I'm reflecting some light in it, I might just pick this area and essentially just taking the value, because I don't want to ruin the value, but increasing the saturation a lot. And I may have to lighten the value a little bit. And I won't do it everywhere, just here and there. Usually it'll be kind of opposite a really bright area, a bright part of the crack. I made this too light here, but I want to put the color in. Then I'll go back and darken it. I just think that adds a bit more dimension to the really dark stuff. I don't think it makes it look any less cracky. It just is a little more interesting to look at. and maybe a little bit on the rock surface even. Kind of like if you ever take painting from me, I will emphasize to spread the colors you use around the image to help harmonize it. And in this case, it can be a little more random than you would think, because we don't know what rocks look like. Now see, this crack to me looks wrong now, so I need to come in and fix that. Looks like it should be, doesn't look like it's on the right side to me, like these do. Maybe it's just the way I'm looking at it. This is what I'll do. Just give it ever so little breaking away kind of thing. I will like to make the crack light side a little lighter when it gets to the corner of things, just to push it back or pull it out a little more. Now the point gets to be, okay, when is enough enough? And I'm probably quickly approaching that. I lost that crack, so I need to make it stand out a little bit more. Now is when I start looking for little, accidental pits and things that I've painted that I can accentuate. That was not good. And see, some of this starts to face the light. It's not really, but it'll look a little better if I add just a little kiss of light on it. I know it's not right, but it looks better than if I don't do anything to it. Well, my color picking skills are negligible today. Round that off. Now that's the thing too. See, I had this color spanning that whole area, and it can't really work like that. It starts to make this not look like a crack with something wrong, so I need to darken so you can see, oh yeah, it does go down deep into the crack there. Same thing on that one. Okay, that is basically it. I could come back in. This is a little light. Now, I'm going to show you how I would manually add holes to this surface. You could do it with brush with a lot. That's a captured dab with a lot of kind of fake detail in it. Or I wonder if I've got one of those. I'm just going to paint them. So on a new layer, and you can do this either dark to light or light to dark. It doesn't matter too much. Good grief. That looks a little strange. Okay, I'm going to just draw these. So let me turn off the flow or the opacity. And I will do it out from the image because I don't want to get too conscious in one specific area. Maybe I ought to just fix this brush. And let me pull this out. So shape dynamics. Get some spacing, scattering. Yeah, I think this will actually work. Maybe. Okay, make it big. New layer, that's not, I don't know that that's going to work. Oh, it is, just the wrong way. Okay, so these are going to be little holes in the rocks. Now, here and there I've got way too many, so I'll erase them out. Like that looks too concentrated to me. I don't want any usually kind of straddling close to one of the edges. And that's an awful lot of little holes, but I think, for example, and these are, you could go in, and a lot of times if I want to be careful, I will paint them by hand, but I think this will be a good example this way anyway. I don't want them, on any of the light edges. So what I'm going to do now is duplicate this layer, leave the dark one on top, and control click. So I got all the little tiny speckles happening. Go back to my brush, and I'm just going to kind of get it back to the original. I should have saved it, but this is okay. That'll work. Now I'm going to come in with the light color. If I can get it picked. And I'll turn off the top layer. And I'm just, let me make it, let's see, big. You see, I should have erased some of those, but I'll take care of it in a minute. So you can see when I'm moving it, you can see the color. And what I'm doing is I'm filling them with this lighter color here. Now, I don't know this. Does anybody know if you can hide the marquee while you're working on it? Or does it need to stay visible all the time? I'm going to have to look into that. I don't know. That is one thing I do. What?
I think it might be a setting you can turn off.
You're probably right. I know in Painter you can just turn them off so they're still active, but you don't see them. Okay, so now I got all these little thingies. Turn on my top layer. And what I'm going to do is with the bottom one, now the only problem with this is you don't have a whole lot of control. You're just creating a whole bunch really quick. So now I've added all these little holes all over it. Really random, but for me, really not controlled enough. I probably need to darken this one. You know, that makes a little better hole. And move this one a little bit more. And I'll try to be brave. Well, I'll just give me another working layer. Whoops. So Shift Control Alt E. So now all my little holes are on a layer. And with this layer, I'm going to just see if I can add a little bit of softening to it, a little bit of blur without destroying all the texture in them. So well, that's 1 pixel, and that's probably okay. You can tell really easily the dark areas that I didn't, well, that's on the original rock. If I missed any, you'll be able to see them really easily. So I don't want these spilling over into the dark areas. So I'll go ahead and, that one on the edge actually looks pretty good, I think. And if I get something that I think looks pretty good like that, I may actually go in and do some more of them manually if I think it adds to the look of it. Okay, and now, so I might consider this done, except let me paint a big hole so you can see how, well, there's kind of two kinds that, let me show you. Go back to get my brush. Oops. Okay, so big hole. The holes will get harder to paint a little bit the bigger they get. Because if you just do something like this, it works, but it makes it look like a real shallow hole. So I don't have the full light yet. So I paint the edge of it, and I can come in and then paint the lighter edge up around here. But the problem I have with this kind of thing is, where's the bottom of it? And you could leave it like this, but I think if you do that, you need to come back in and slightly indicate some of the depth to it. And then maybe add a few of the lighter edges where they might be, if you can select the darn color. Okay, if you don't want to, or if you don't, the other kind would be the same thing, but for a shallower hole. So let me duplicate this. So I've got 2 holes now. Pretty much the same thing, except I would paint around these edges a little bit more. So I would take this and get a little more in here, pull the lighter color up. Kind of giving it the feeling that, you know, there's a bottom in there somewhere. This is almost more like, well, it's more like a shallow hole. Get the damn color. And so you don't go as dark because the some light bounces in and out of there. So that would be a shallower version. I'd probably have to work it a little bit more. And on both of them, I might, let me merge these two. Come back in and, you know, extend a crack or something down into them. If it looks like it would be appropriate. I don't want to do it just because I don't have anything else to do. But you want to paint a bump, and that's really easy too. So, and if you want to be a really sloppy artist, like I sometimes want to be, duplicate it, edit, and I'm going to transform it, flip it horizontal, and flip it vertical. So with a little additional work, all of a sudden my holes will become bumps because I now start to lighten this area there. I would never do that without changing them, doing something. But at the same time, I will do it like crazy if I can do it and not, and I can save me a bunch of time. So I may paint a dozen of them or half a dozen or whatever, different sizes, all of that kind of thing. Make them look different and paste them all over. Now, I don't really like, took me a while to learn this part in Photoshop, is, you know, you can duplicate the layer. So I hold it down, and so this top layer, I duplicate it. The problem for me is I don't necessarily want to create another layer. So when I was learning, I was so happy to see if I'll just select it first. Then I can duplicate them and keep duplicating them. But they are all on one layer. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. And then when you hit Enter or Control D, then you have them all on one layer. If I've got a lot of little things, like these holes, I could group some of those and move them around, because you can transform them and they'll still stay on the layer. So let me do that. Control. Okay, so I'm holding the Alt key, it's dragging it around, and I can transform them, scale them, do anything I want, and then I can do another drag them off. So you can make an awful lot of copies without creating hundreds of layers. It's all about speeding up a little bit more. So that then is rocks, and much more successful today than before. It's just basic. I don't like my holes and bumps, but I kind of like my cracks even better without the little holes. I might come in at this point, just create a new layer, and then using that big original brush that I was using. Let me get that big texture brush. It's getting hard for me to read all the little tiny text things. Okay. at the very end, oh, and there is one more thing I would do too. So make it something else, multiply or lighten or something. Multiply, I like this because you can kind of slightly even change the color. Do it really light. I'll create a new layer. And this one I'll set to, I like it this kind, I like a lot of times overlay soft light or hard light, but I'll use screen also. And pick a more orangey, dark color. So I can see that it's adding a little bit more color to it. Zoom in. But if I did that too early, painting the cracks and things would be much more difficult. And then the last thing I would do on this, I'd go ahead and collapse all those layers. Move holes out of the way. Or merge them down. Now so now I just put them all in their own layer. Something like this, I would come in and add some noise to it. I think it just softens any hand-drawn feel that I get. I find the best amount for me is 3 to 4%. So if I turn off the preview, I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom in. Okay, so uniform or Gaussian, depends. Uniform you can get away with a little more. That's too much. So again, 3, 4, 5%. Gaussian's a little more noticeable. And click OK. If it's too much, it just makes it a little less digital looking. Blurs a few of your little brush strokes. The brush strokes, you can see it helped a lot. The texture brushes and the cracks, it added a little bit of detail but got rid of my strokes. And so it looks a whole lot more, if what you want is photographic, or at least more, I just think it looks better. So, any questions? I'm going to stop